I'm going to talk about an excellent article that I read, but first we're going to establish that Tinder is a dating app where people choose potential partners based almost entirely on physical appearance. They like somebody, they swipe right. They don't like somebody, they swipe left. So they accept or dismiss people on how they look. They do judge by the cover of the book. Now, you might be one of the 3 people, other than myself, who didn't know that, but I'm stating it to be sure so that everybody knows. And if there's anything else that you want to know that you would find incredibly valuable on this subject of parenting, hit the subscribe button and like and discuss and the bells and, that stuff that you see in front of you. So the author of the article proposed a question in the title of her piece. She said, Tinder promised that it would revolutionize romance. It really did. So why are my peers, she says, lonelier and more intimacy deprived than ever? Good question. Then she said, never before have young people been lonelier. Now, the author of this article, brilliant, excellent writer, is 27 years old. And she's on all the dating apps. She's using them all. She says, quote, but it seems that all the would-be husbands, potential partners, she's looking for a husband, have been left functionally castrated, that's striking phrase, by porn addictions or slaving away at a 9-to-5 job trying to pay for a tiny apartment, or too distracted by internet searches and YouTube and gaming to even entertain the notion of going on a real date. So what is she saying? Where in the world are the potential husbands? And she's out there at 27, attractive, bright, articulate, and she's going, what? Where are they? Good question. So how did this happen? This is an articulate woman looking to find a life partner. She's not just looking for a brief fling, a brief sexual liaison. No, a partner, a real relationship. And she can't find a single person to date. What's with that? Answer. Because there is an answer. That's the thing that just makes me moderately crazy about reading newspaper articles and articles all over the place, is that they're excellent at identifying the problems. I mean, like, whoa. Philosophers are great at doing this and have been throughout history. Here's the problem, and there's no answer. It leads people to believe that there isn't an answer, but there is. These men that she's looking for, these man boys, we'll call them, who are out there, are utterly unprepared for life, much less a relationship. These boys stay boys. And as usual, I'm going to assert, no surprise, that the cause of this problem is rooted in the most important subjects on the planet: unconditional love and parenting. Yeah, it's really that simple, which doesn't mean that it's easy, but it is that simple, and there is a bloody solution. It's not like, oh, what are we going to do? Which is what I hear all day long in podcasts and reading. I just see hand-wringing, and people are clueless about what to do. So let's do something. These boys were not sufficiently loved unconditionally. I know. We roll our eyes and go, it can't be that simple. Oh, yes, it is. Period. It is only these boys who weren't loved who are trying to treat their pain by using praise, power, pleasure, and pause, women. Like, duh, it's a great source of imitation love. The parents of these boys did not love and teach them. I don't have to be in their homes when I look at these kids. I look at one of these lost boys and go, nobody loved and taught them. And I've interviewed so many thousand of them now that I know this to be a statistical bloody fact. These boys were not loved and taught because I've interviewed them. What was it like at home? And I look for any indication of love, unconditional love. I'm looking for it. I'm not looking to find that they weren't loved. I'm looking for evidence that they were. Nothing. So they're in pain. And so what did they do with their pain? They treated their pain by playing video games. They failed in school. They turned to porn. Whatever. Anything will do in a storm. It's not society's fault. It's not government programs. These boys failed to turn into men because they weren't loved and taught at home. I watched a recent podcast from a man who's, I think, the first black Republican candidate for president. And whether he's still a candidate, and you hear this, who knows? They come and go. And he was talking about how he was raised in the same environment as other young black men. And his life turned out radically different from 99.9% of them because he had one person who loved him and taught him. That was the difference. It wasn't a government program. It wasn't society. Somebody loved and taught him. But these men who were not loved and taught didn't learn to be men. So they are entirely unavailable for potential partners when they reach an age where committed relationships are possible. When they happen, they were eliminated from dating. Talk about swiping left and right, yeah? I mean, here are these kids who were not prepared. They're crippled, and they swiped themselves out of the dating market. Somebody else didn't have to do that for them. Well, how convenient. They used addictions that temporarily soothed their pain instead. Now, most girls are not ready either. Most. But boys are, for 100 reasons we're not going to talk about, more susceptible to the addictions that cripple young adults. Video games, porn, and lack of responsibility. Those are the three. Video games, porn, and lack of responsibility. Poof, the kid is out of the market. 60% of college students now are women, and even more in graduate schools. There are graduate schools that are 70% and more women. What happened to the men? Pay attention. Video games, porn, and lack of responsibility. Nobody loved and taught them. They're gone. Gone. Schools are dying to have more men. They're gone. They're not eligible. The author describes a young man in his 20s, Shane, who says, quote, "I want a relationship. I don't want to be a loner anymore." The author continues. She says, but Shane is convinced that he's not good enough. Specifically, he's not good enough on the measures that dating apps look for. And wow, are those algorithms demanding. There are apps that prepare you for dating apps. That's how intense this is. Because there are some men out there looking to be eligible. He's been calorie counting, protein tracking, lifting compulsively for about 2 years in hopes of achieving the ideal body type, lean and fit. He's playing the game that the women do. He's playing the left-right swipe game. He reads Reddit's relationship boards to get a sense of what women complain about. Bad sex, manners, politics, hygiene, and overbearing in-laws, to name just a few, to see how he can be the best date when he finally works up the courage to ask for one. Or be asked on these apps. He says, a lot of my anxiety ties back to my seeing that there's a lot to be worried about. People are not very accepting. No kidding. In the absence of the unconditional love that we all need, we settle for anything rather than getting nothing. Everybody would prefer fresh cookies, but in the absence of those, we'll settle for stale. Like, what do we settle for? The list goes on and on. Entertainment, comfort, safety in mom's basement, sex, power, porn, blah, da-da. We talked about it. Games, porn, lack of responsibility. These boys were not given love, so they settle for garbage. They don't learn to explore or learn or be vulnerable or be humble. That requires preparation, requires teaching. And these are all the qualities required in a real relationship. Yes, women swipe left and right. They do, just like men do. But the qualities they're really looking for in a man, and women are way deeper about this than men are, they're looking for vulnerable and humble and sensitive and sweet. How do you develop that when you're afraid, when you're in pain? Impossible. So, the author says, who is to blame? The favorite question asked on podcasts and articles. Let's blame. Look in the news. If somebody's murdered, what do we do first? We look for the killer, as though somehow that's going to soothe the grieving and the lack and the want and the emptiness of the family of the person who was killed. No, Got to find somebody to blame. So she says, who are we going to blame? Mark Zuckerberg, social media, and Steve Jobs and the sexual revolution and the pill, and she kind of went on, blah, blah, blah. She said, quote, but I'd like to start with parents and the concept of snowplow parenting. This is one of the few times in all of my readings, like thousands of pages, that somebody says, well, what about the parents? Nobody talks about the parents. Of course, they don't have a clue what to do about the parent, but at least she's bringing it up. She says, helicopter parents were infamous in the early aughts, 2000s, for involving themselves in the minutia of their children's lives, from diets free of GMOs to making sure that they were first chair violinists. But Dr. Michael Unger, a PhD in social work who specializes in what makes people resilient, says snowplow parents of the later millennials and the Generation Zers, which is pretty much the generation that has never known a time without devices, they're on a whole other level. They clear their children's boundless horizons of even the tiniest of obstacles. Think dubious doctor's notes to get them more time on the SAT. These parents are protecting their children from any pain, actually, any inconvenience. Which brings us to a question. What is the goal, not what should be the goal, what actually is the goal of parents more and more? And I've interviewed thousands, keep in mind. That's actually a statistical study, and I keep it in my head, admittedly. But I can tell you the results. Is the goal of the parents for their children growth of their children? Genuine internal, emotional, soul, character growth. Genuineness. Self-discovery. Self-motivation. Which all of these are just higher level qualities. No, that's not their goal. The goal of the parents is no pain, no discomfort for the child or the parent. It's all about the parent protecting themselves. No disapproval, no failure. They control everything for the child. So what's the result if you control everything for a child? The child couldn't possibly develop what most psychologists now are saying is maybe one of the most important qualities, maybe one of the highest qualities, which is resilience. The ability to rebound and to deal with difficulty, even failure, falling on your face. Falling on our faces is inevitable. What we can control is our ability to get up. So the result is these kids have no resilience, no discovery in their lives, no exploration of who they are and how the world is. Just ease. Ease. That's what we worship, and that's what parents are trying to provide. It kind of looks good, but just ease. What our children really require, though, is honesty, humility, learning how to be loving. Listen to these. These are the qualities for not only life, but being a potential partner. Learning how to accept, learning how to adapt, learning to be resilient, learning how to deal with inconvenience, discomfort, injustice, bullying, aggression, anger, learning how to deal with the world, learning how to be with other people. Our kids aren't learning this. We learn resilience from interacting best. We don't learn resilience by sitting in a chair and eating Cheetos and watching YouTube. No, that's ease. We learn resilience from interacting with flawed people, not perfect people, and all that they bring, not from looking for the easy way in people without inconvenience. There are a lot of signs that relationships are in deep trouble. The birth rate in the United States is at the lowest it's been in more than a century. Just this morning, I found an article about that. And it turns out I'm not middle-aged anymore. I'm actually old. And in the article, the author stated that there's a growing gap that will negatively impact generations to come. According to CNN, quote, the primary reason that most women cite for not wanting kids, according to a Pew Research Center survey. These guys are spectacular in analyzing society. They report, these women, that they just, quote, don't want to, end quote, have children. Too much trouble. What does that indicate? Women aren't looking to take on themselves more responsibility. They're not looking to be more loving, which parenting absolutely requires. Am I telling women to have children? No, I'm just noting what's happening. What's happening is women are going, I don't want that responsibility. I don't want another soul to come into the world that I would have to learn to love, because then I'd have to focus on something other than me. Now, this is what the women are saying, but the men who are with them, who would potentially be fathering these children, they don't want them either. It's usually a joint decision, not always. I don't want responsibility. China, terrible effects of selfishness. If I don't want responsibility and I don't want to learn to love, there's a name for that. Selfishness. China, same effects. Not enough workers. Most young people in China are not working at all. One region in China is paying you cash if you get married younger in life. Russia offers mothers big payments if they birth younger than 27 years old. In Hungary, birthing mothers, this just kills me, birthing mothers under 30 are exempt from personal income tax for the rest of their lives. The president of that country said that in Hungary, the national values are family, nation, and God. And then he added, whereas Western societies are interested in dealing only with me, me, me. So here's a guy who's the president of Hungary, and he's got Western society just nailed. He sees us. We are absolutely selfish. Another name for me, me, me. From 2008 to 2018, the number of men under 30 who had not had sex in the past year tripled. Now, clearly, I don't care whether young men have sex, but the indication is they don't even want to get near other women, and real women. They don't want to take on the responsibility. They don't want to take on the risk. Selfish again. It's increased from 10% to about almost 30% of young men under 30 who've never had a sexual relationship. It's intimate relationship, a more intense relationship live. It's not about sex. There are new online groups of what are called incels, involuntary celibates, because of being swiped left, porn, whatever. They're celibate. And now dating sites are increasingly going to subcategories of their site where you have to pay to talk to some people. You don't just throw yourself out there in the market. No, you pay to get access to the superior picks, and they're called top picks or standouts or who knows, celebrities. A man named Justin attended John Jay College of Criminal Justice in New York, where he says he became jealous of the happy couples he saw walking around. This author of this article interviewed him. He started jogging, and in November of last year, he downloaded a dating app. He said it was a disaster. Most of the women I matched with sent me their OnlyFans profile. I was woefully underinformed about this site, where it's a platform where users can pay to access, among other things, personalized porn from the person that they're looking for. How do you imagine that's going to work out? Am I alarmed? It's all pretty horrifying in some ways, but there's a solution. So I'm not freaking out, and you don't have to either, if you have an interest in doing something. So what's the solution? Parents must learn to unconditionally love and teach. They have to learn to do this. Is there a way to do that? Oh yeah, we're getting to that. Boys without love will settle for eating garbage. They become garbage as far as relationships go. This man, Jeff, calls the daily slog of swiping apps and never getting any results kind of debilitating. Yeah, he says it affects my view of myself and how I connect to other people. He obsesses over the ratios. If you can imagine, they do this online with pictures of his face and the proportions of his body and skull. And he describes the internet as simultaneously a lifeline and a noose. We can't live without social media and porn and games. These young men can't. And yet, they can't live with it. So why don't they just leave it? Because then they would have nothing left. If all you have remaining is garbage and somebody tells you stop eating garbage, what's left? Starving to death. What's the solution? Feed them. And we're getting there. There is a solution. This isn't hand-wringing. Between, says another man named Philip, between social media and porn and podcasts and video games, you can live a low-quality, this word is brilliant, simulation of what a fulfilling life would be. It just becomes a life simulation. He says you can get social interaction from social media, the feeling of problem solving or being productive from video games, and a kind of sexual fulfillment from porn and entertainment from YouTube and on and on. The word that I use that applies to all of it is virtuality. We become addicted to a simulation, said the one man, of life, but it's not living. Many of you remember that back in the 1990s, there was a program called SimCity. It was popular. You could go to SimCity and you could create an avatar of yourself. You could buy clothes and cars and the house you lived in and remodel it. Unbelievable. And we chuckled, many of us at the time, going, people settle for a fake life? Yeah, they did. And we chuckled, but now it's real. It's happening. These young men, by the hundreds of thousands, that's really wrong, millions, are living virtual lives. They're watching YouTube. They're watching people do stuff. They're on porn watching people do stuff. It's a virtual world. Philip, the same man, said he started needing more and more extreme content to masturbate to. Completely virtual simulated life. He says that he does this about 5 times a day. Now, instead of being horrified or disgusted, pay attention and learn something about human beings. Don't be horrified at the state of the world and instead learn about the world. People wonder how, for example, because there are few subjects that get more attention than child porn. Somebody gets jailed for that, and Jeffrey Epstein, how many entries are there in Google about him? And we vilify them or horrified by them, but we should wonder how they came to be. Pay attention to what this kid says. He says he started needing more and more. Nobody starts off with child porn. I've interviewed how many child porn users and just plain porn users, and they start off with a picture, a single photo, when they're 8 or 9. Then soft porn and harder core porn, and now by 11, that's the average age of addiction of a young man. Could you call somebody who's 11 a young man? Then it becomes more violent porn. Every addiction requires more. I was a narcotics addict for years, and every addict, no matter what the substance is, whether it's narcotics, whether it's alcohol, whether it's porn, everybody starts off with a sip of alcohol, one pill, one picture. And then that doesn't do it anymore. It just wears off like every addiction, like almost every pleasure. And so then you do 2 and 3, and then you go to a different kind, and before long, whoa. So picture, soft porn, harder core, violent, twisted, and then anything new, including kids. And instead of being horrified, we need to see how they got there. Our young men are on the way there. The incidence of child porn use now is unbelievably large, and it's getting reported on more and more. Now we're actually trafficking small children. Why? Because they started looking at pictures when they were 8. That's your kids we're talking about. Yours. 8 and 9. They may be well into their porn addiction. If your kid's 12 years old, the odds are very high that he's already porn addicted. Porn addicted as in like 50%. Not joking. And it's all due to the lure of anything to numb the pain. Instead of horrifying, let's say almost inevitable. If a child doesn't feel loved, that's where he's going to go, somewhere. Listen to this Philip, who talks about his increasing porn addiction. He says, I'm assuming these things, social media, porn, games, he just named the big three, don't give you as much as a normal life would. So he's not entirely dead. He sees this, but he says it stops people, meaning himself, from hitting rock bottom. The lowest possible quality of life you can have with the internet is still kind of tolerable. It's not absolutely awful. What he means is it's not death. And he says there's nothing to give you a kick up the butt because it's not the worst thing, which is nothing. And nobody's giving him an alternative. We tell our kids to stop using whatever, the internet, porn, irresponsibility. We tell them, stop that, we say in our stentorial tone. Stop that. And the kid's going, you're kidding. What's my option? Give that up. The kid is hanging from a bar above, a rod above the waterfall where he's going to fall to death, and you tell him just, let go. What? So we survive instead of living. It's all we can do in the absence of real thing. Now back to snowplow parents. They give their kids everything, or so it appears, and so they believe, but they don't unconditionally love them. I'm defending them. It's all they have to give. We have to stop focusing on protecting children. Ugh. I stand in front of audiences of hundreds of parents and say, is not protecting our children the most important thing we can do? And I say it like that. Is it not? And everybody raises their hand. Yes, it is. No, it's not. That's not what we're here for. We're not here to protect our kids. We want them. We must want them to know inconvenience, injustice, hard work, bullying, discomfort, sweat. We want them to know those things. None of those things is good by themselves. I'm not suggesting we kill our children with them. But in the presence of love, all of those things become opportunities for our kids to learn. Kill me. I had a mother here at my home. She brought her 11-year-old son, and after a day, she asked what I thought of her son. And I said, well, your son is sensitive. He's kind. He's a beautiful young man. She said, what does he need? I wasn't going to force that question on her, but she asked. And I said, he needs more pain than discomfort. I said, when I played outside with him or I did anything with him outside, as soon as he became the slightest bit tired or hot, as soon as he was uncomfortable, he went in the house and got something to eat or drink and got cool. So she said, do you have a potential solution? I said, sure, more pain. And she was picturing me, beating her child. No, I just sat down with him and I said, so we're going to go out and play. We're going to go out and do some things you really enjoyed yesterday. And we're going to get to the place where you're hot. Well, listen to this, because this will save your kid. We're going to get to the place where you're hot and you want to go in. And then we're going to keep going for 20 minutes. And he looked at me like, what are you talking about? So we went outside. Happened to be that it was 95 degrees outside and 80% humidity, which is enough to melt the skin off your bones. And took a chainsaw and started it up and started cutting bamboo. An interesting proposition if you've never done it. And I handed him the chain and taught him how to use it, a chainsaw. And we're cutting down bamboo and hauling it and cutting it up into pieces. And I mean, it's hot. Sweat is pouring from this kid's brow. And he said, this is hot. And I said, perfect. So we're going to go for another 20 minutes of this. But in this tone, not, well, I don't care. We're going to go 20 more minutes. No. In the presence of love, pain teaches only. I said, yeah, it's bloody hot. It's just as hot for me. We're going to go for 20 more minutes. And he went, okay. We went for 20 more minutes, and he wouldn't quit. He wanted to swing that chainsaw around. He was like the man. He was like Rambo. The kid felt loved. He was taught. Now the next day, He wakes up, he comes to me and he says, can we go outside and cut some more bamboo? Yeah. The kid who'd never experienced hot and tired, when he experienced it and he felt loved, it was ennobling to this kid. It was so cool. He wanted to do it the next day. He learned a desire to be stronger, more independent, more creative, hardworking. This kid is far less likely to be distracted by the virtual world. And when he went in, he didn't go get a device. Proof. I'm just describing what works. I'm describing an answer that consistently works instead of just bemoaning how things are. Now, at the end of the article that I've been talking about, the author lamented, as we all do, the dating scene and the condition of young adults, and there was no solution offered. Nothing. Great article, but futile. All these discussions about dating, romance, and marriage are fruitless unless we recognize and address what we're all looking for in that frenetic desire to connect. We want to feel loved. Everybody knows that. And right there, the conversation either stops dead, certainly online and in articles, stops, or it explodes and people argue. Sure, romance looks and feels exciting, but we want a kind of love, an entirely different and better love that most of us have never seen. So we don't believe it exists, understandably. So people identify no solution. What we want is to be loved unconditionally, where we don't have to earn it, where we don't have to buy it with our appearance, our success, and all those qualities we desperately include in our profiles. I talked to a young person just the other day, and after 30 minutes, this guy looks at me and he goes, I've never felt like this before. This isn't a 30-minute conversation. Never before. I said, so what's the name for that? He says, I feel like you actually care about me without me doing anything. Well, that's a pretty perfect description of unconditional love, huh? In unconditional love or real love, there's no disappointment or anger, ever. None. Imagine that. Most of us can't imagine that. And yet, this is what makes life worth living. So, crazy making. What we want most is the thing that we can't imagine. But it exists. It's not a mystery. It's not. It's achievable. And you can learn about it at reallove.com, a website that is my life's passion. It's a source of guidance that promises genuine happiness and confidence without attempting to sell anything. The parent's job is to love and teach. Solves every major problem in the world today. Dating, if parents love kids, they feel loved and they'll find other loved kids. And I've seen it over and over. It's a perfect solution. Political contention evaporates. When parents feel loved and they're loving, now the parents aren't in contention with each other online, and the kids get involved in being loved. Bullying, self-harming, porn, name a problem, and the solution is, surprise, love, and the parents who give it while they teach. Not mysterious. Do you want to learn about love, parenting, preparing your young men and women before their lives become desperate? You can learn that. And it's all in realloveparents.com. Have fun with this. I have.